have a really special guest this week on Wife of the Party. His name is Dr. Kwane Stewart. He is a veterinarian, and he has a nonprofit called Project Street Vet. You can go to projectstreetvet.org if you want to find out more about his services or donate. He's a wonderful human that gives of his time and his expertise as a veterinarian to service the unhoused population's pet animal needs. He just goes out into places where the unhoused are living and treats their animals for free. What an amazing human being he is, a selfless, giving, lovely human being. He has an incredible story. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wife of the Party with Dr. Kwane Stewart. If you are so inclined to donate or to find out more information, you can go to his website at projectstreetvet.org and donate or just check it out. Thank you so much for coming to do my podcast.
Yeah, I was happy to.
So I watched the Spectrum News 1 interview with you, and I was so inspired by what you do. I think there's so many good people in the world, but in LA especially, we live with a homeless population that's insane, and I feel very helpless a lot. I donate a lot to Hope of the Valley because that's what I can do. I do their turkey trot every year. And I also donate to them. But I love what you do with homeless and animals. So can you talk to me about that? I mean, I've read your bio, I heard your interview, but I was like, I just think, are people doing this in other cities?
I think, first off, thank you for that. It's been sort of what turned or started as maybe a hobby, a passionate hobby, has now grown, obviously, and we can get into that, but now it's expanded. It's expanded to other cities. So now I'm doing what I've been doing in other cities with the help of volunteers, other veterinarians who were inspired to do the same work. But yes, this work, helping the underprivileged, helping unhoused pets, it's going on all over. You just may not know about it as much. It's sort of fragmented. I wish we were sort of all working under one big umbrella, like a One Health sort of thing, and we were more connected because we all want the same thing. We want these pets that are on the streets that ordinarily probably wouldn't get any sort of medical care to get that care, and keep them, in doing so, keep them with their mom or their dad. And that's the hard part, is when they get sick. And if you close your eyes and you imagine someone on the streets who has nothing else, no possessions, no family, no friends, and they have become entirely emotionally, psychologically dependent on this little creature for support, for love, for purpose. And that little creature gets sick, and the only way it's going to get help is if they relinquish it to the local shelter. They have to give it up. And they will do that to see it, to make sure it gets the care it needs, but then they lose all rights to that pet. That's just the way the system works. So our job is to go out and find these pets, to provide the preventative care, which ensures a longer life, the wellness, and then I treat a lot of sick pets right there under a traffic light, whatever I can do.
That's amazing. That really is a gift. I remember being very broke in New York. I lived in New York City, and I had a cat. And I very much relied, I was an only child and always had a cat. I had one cat for 18 years, and my second cat was in New York. And being lonely and scared and new to a city, I'm from rural Georgia. I moved to Manhattan, didn't know anybody, and my cat had asthma, and I could not afford to take the cat to the vet. And it was the most stressful thing, one of the most stressful things that I experienced as a young adult that was just flat broke. I can't imagine not having a home and feeling that way too. I cannot possibly relate to someone who doesn't have a home. I've never been home insecure, but I've definitely been flat broke, and just, it's so incredibly upsetting to know that this creature depends on you and you just can't provide. It's terrible. So what a relief you're giving to these sweet souls, that the homeless population just breaks my heart because I think they all are people who just need so much help and support and are completely misunderstood. And to be seen by someone who is in a position like you are to help them and just be seen as a person has got to be so powerful for the person.
Yeah, it is. So talk about being seen. I've encountered, and I could probably tell you a story from a week ago or 2 weeks ago where, and actually this happens more times than not, where I come across a very healthy pet. And you would think a lot of times these pets on the streets, because they haven't been seen, it's like not going to the dentist for 5 years. You'd expect you to go in there, he's going to open your mouth and see all kinds of problems. But I don't see that as often as someone who doesn't do this work might think.
Mm-hmm.
They're fairly well kept. They get a lot of attention. The owners are on it. Like when I work in clinic and you were to bring your dog to me,
mm-hmm.
and let's say you have a very busy life,
mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to get a history. So how long has the itching been going? How long have they been flapping their ears? And I get maybe a week. I'd have to ask my husband, can I text him? I'm out there with these folks. No, they know almost to the minute when it started, how long it's been going on, how often they do it. They're just so in tune with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to being seen, sometimes I come across these pets who are in great health and don't need anything, but their pet parent just wants to sit and talk.
Right.
They are so enamored to know and feel that someone is approaching them with no agenda,
mm-hmm.
and wants to talk about the thing they love the most and let them gush on the thing they love the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then just talk, like, to talk to an outside person. As I say, a person in the more normal world,
mm-hmm.
right? Who's showing that they care, and just sit and talk. And that's when I get all these really cool stories. I mean, they'll go back in their history and, tough times in their life. And it's funny, and it starts to bring out some moments, like you said, when you were flat broke. And I'll share a story back in college when I went a day without eating, which obviously doesn't compare to them, but it helps me relate a little bit, because to know what it feels like to be hungry
mm-hmm.
for a day, it's hard.
Yeah.
And they do that a lot. So there is a big emotional exchange with these people a lot of times.
It's got to be incredibly rewarding for you.
It's rewarding on a scale that's it's sometimes hard for me to describe. To take you back a little bit. So when are we going to start the podcast?
We already did.
No.
My podcast is just a conversation.
Yeah, we're just talking. I'm joking. So the question that most people ask is why I started doing it, or when, or what brought me to this. And I was a shelter vet myself for 5 years, starting in 2007. And I had never done shelter work before. I was what I would call back in the day sort of a pampered veterinarian. I worked in a community that had people that could pay for most anything. So you love those clients that come in and I recommend certain treatment or care, and they say, just do whatever you need to do, right? Mm-hmm. It allows me the freedom to practice top-notch medicine. And I had that for a lot of years. And then I decided to take on, and I don't know why, this challenge of being a shelter vet, which is a different universe. And I just happened to take this job in Central California, Modesto, right when the recession started. So it was
back in 2008?
2007, 2008.
Yeah.
It was ground zero here in California anyways for the recession and people losing their homes and the economic crisis and so forth. And what happens is that trickles down to your pets, because when you don't have the money or the resources, then you're not paying for medical care. Sometimes you're not paying for food. There's a lot of open land. So people had horses and cattle. And so feed goes up and you see starving horses out in the pasture.
Oh, God.
And then people are just, I'm the county veterinarian was my official title. And I'm managing this entire county of animals and welfare. And we take everything, right? It's horses, it's cows, it's chickens, it's dogs, cats. And there's no questions asked at a municipal shelter. For those that don't know, I don't have the luxury of like a no kill. And I think no kills are great. They have their place in society today. But back then we would always get a bad rap that we were just like the death dealer, right? We take them in, they never leave. But by county law, we don't have a choice. It's open door access. You can drop your pet at our doorstep, no questions asked, and we have to bring it in. And that's what was happening. People were so embarrassed at times They didn't want to be seen. They didn't want to
Aw.
have to give a story or an explanation. They would just drop the leash and the dog, and they'd walk right out, and the dog's ours. And you get overrun, and we were overrun. There were, some mornings, boxes of kittens,
Oh
5,
my
6 boxes of
God.
kittens being dropped off, and dozens of dogs, and our euthanasia rate was crazy. I mean, it takes me back to a time of guilt, but some mornings we were euthanizing 50, 60
Oh my
dogs and
God.
cats by 10 a.m.
Oh my God.
And I found myself in my own little hole, emotional hole. And so anyways, I was only able to do that work for 5 years. I will say there were some victories. We built a brand new state-of-the-art shelter while I was there, and the old one was old. It was 40 years old, and it was like a prison. But the brand new one was more like that was my vision when I was trying to propose this to city council. I wanted something that would be like a beacon in the city, like a library or a park where families could come, and it's bright lighting and healthy looking pets, and they could find their new family member.
Right.
And we met that vision. So we had the brand new shelter. Our euthanasia rate was cut in half. Our adoption rate doubled. So all that happened in the 5 years I was there.
That's
I
amazing.
was very proud of that time. But in doing so, I think I had left a piece of myself behind. And one day when I was thinking about quitting the shelter, this is probably year 3 of 5. In fact, I thought about going home and writing my letter of resignation on this day. And I was sitting outside 7-Eleven. I could not go in that day and do another euthanasia or direct my staff to do that, which was normally the case. And I sat in my car thinking what I was going to do in the next chapter of my life. And I was thinking about maybe a fitness trainer. I like to exercise. I was going to do something completely removed from veterinary medicine. But for a veterinarian to think about leaving the profession after everything it takes to get there, that is a major issue.
It's a red flag.
It's a big red flag
Yeah.
after the financial investment of the time. And I had come to that point. I was just going to walk away, not just from the shelter. I just want to walk away from medicine. And I was coming out of 7-Eleven, and to my left, there was this unhoused man with his dog, a man I'd seen before and walked right by before, sadly. But on this day, I noticed his dog had an issue, a skin issue. And I got closer, and it looked like nothing more than fleas. But fleas on a dog long enough, really, they just destroy the skin. And this dog looked like a burn victim on the hind end.
Oh.
The hair was gone, the skin was red and bumpy, and the dog was miserable. The guy was miserable, and he was just sitting there sort of tucked away in the corner of the 7-Eleven, and he just looked exasperated. And I said, my name's Kwane Stewart. I'm a veterinarian, and if you're here tomorrow, I think I have something that might help. So I returned as promised, and it was $3 out of my pocket and 5 more minutes of my time, and I returned 10 days later, and the dog was transformed.
Amazing.
The hair was coming back. She was wagging her tail. And the guy sitting in the exact same spot looked up at me with tears in his eyes. And he just said, "Thank you for not ignoring me."
Ugh.
And that was the moment. And so you talk about the feeling that I feel when I do the work. That was the first time I felt it. And I still feel it every time I meet somebody new. And that's why I do the work.
Well, yeah. That is why you do the work, right? That's an amazing story. That's such an emotional story. Do you think working those 5 years in that county shelter informed what you do now in a specific way, or was it just to push you to a point where you had to make a different decision?
In my career?
Yeah, and kind of in your life, because I think to me, if I'm listening, it sounds like it changed your life, like your whole life.
Yeah. It was a convergence of a lot of things. And if I'm being honest, maybe being naive about veterinary medicine, because prior to the shelter, I'd never been exposed to something like that. And
like the county shelter?
Yeah.
Well, they don't really sign you up for that. It's like saying,
No.
"Hey, how about you come be an abortion doctor?" No one wants to do that. No one goes to medical school to do that. So I can't imagine anyone goes to veterinary school to euthanize animals.
No.
That's so counterintuitive.
It is. I mean, there's an element that's necessary, sadly, and I know a lot of people would push back on that, but when our shelter can only hold 300 pets and we have 500, then there's disease outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There is a domino effect of problems that happen within a society or within a county or community when pets, the animals, the wildlife aren't taken care of. And I can just run through a list of diseases that can be transmitted to people, zoonotic diseases. So that system is important, but my issue is we can do much better as a society, just being private owners of our own pets, to keep people want to blame the shelter and blame shelters for euthanizing, but it really comes back to individuals,
right?
Not spaying and neutering and doing the right thing.
Yes.
And so I learned all this in the shelter, and it was a big eye opener. And yeah, I know with certainty I would not be here doing what I'm doing, which I do. I'm not going to say I'm a big believer in destiny, but I have found my place in the world, given my talent and education, because of those years in the shelter.
Wife of the Party is sponsored by HelloFresh. You all know I'm a big fan of HelloFresh. I love not having to think about what to cook. I love not having to plan a meal. I love not having to shop for a meal. I love going to the fridge and just pulling everything out and following an easy to follow recipe card and having a delicious dinner ready. It's just me and Isla at home most of the time. So it's really awesome to make a HelloFresh for dinner, and then she can take some to lunch and I can take some to work. I love this service because it just takes the stress out of eating, and it's very affordable. HelloFresh takes the stress out of mealtime by delivering fresh ingredients and easy recipes right to your door. This fall, skip that extra trip to the grocery store and have dinner ready in no time with America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh is more than just dinners. You can also stock your fridge with easy breakfasts, quick lunches, and fresh snacks. Just shop HelloFresh Market and add any of these tasty, time-saving solutions to your weekly box. Go to HelloFresh.com/50wife and use the code 50wife for 50% off, plus 15% off the next 2 months. That's amazing. Go to HelloFresh.com/50wife and use code 50wife for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. Wife of the Party is sponsored by Air Doctor. We live in LA. LA has notoriously bad air. So living in LA, at least for me, kind of requires that you take care of the air you breathe all day long. Air Doctor has been amazing in helping me do that. I have an Air Doctor in our living room, and it circulates throughout the main part of our house. I can hear when it kicks on. It kicks on when there's a lot of bad stuff in the air, and that makes me feel so good. I don't have to think about turning up the volume on that thing if we're having a bad day, a bad air quality day in LA. It just does it all for me. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors and take about 20,000 breaths a day. According to the EPA, indoor air is 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, and in some cases, up to 100 times more polluted. Data shows that air pollution is responsible for nearly 7 million premature deaths globally. So what is the solution? Air Doctor filters out 99.9% of dangerous contaminants and allergens such as pollen, pet dander, dust mite, mold, and even bacteria and viruses, so your lungs don't have to. All Air Doctor purifiers also feature whisper jet fans, 30% quieter than your ordinary air purifiers. Air Doctor also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you don't love it, just send it back for a refund minus shipping. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code WIFE, and depending on the model, you'll receive up to 39% off or up to $300 off. Exclusive to podcast customers, you will also receive a free 3-year warranty on any unit, which is an additional $84 value. Lock this special offer by going to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code WIFE. That's airdoctorpro.com, promo code WIFE. I fully believe in destiny. Because you said to me, I don't even know why I took that job. So why you took that job, I think, would be to be here today. That was the purpose. sometimes you don't know the purpose until the purpose reveals itself, right? In life.
Lands on your head.
Yes. And you go, oh, that's why I did that. That's why I had that mom or that experience or that boss. And all of a sudden you look back and go, that taught me so much about myself, about life, about society, about the world, about animals. I'm sure you learned, it must have been a crash course on animals in a certain way, like being the veterinarian you first described in a community where people could afford to pay for things. I would imagine would be very different than being a veterinarian in a shelter where animals come in who are possibly, I would imagine, abused. We had a shelter cat. Believe it or not, you see the 2 full breed bull mastiffs downstairs. They're the only full breed anything we've ever had. I am all about shelter adopting. We have one cat just showed up at our house. The other one we got from the shelter in Van Nuys, East Valley Shelter, I think it's called. Another cat I got from an adoption day at Petco. My husband's the full breed guy. He's the snob. She
just pinned it on her husband.
Totally called out. He's the one. I mean, when he first wanted a bull mastiff, I was like, let's just go to the shelter and get a big dog. I'm cool with that. But he wanted to know the parents because our kids were so small. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to meet the parents and know the disposition of the parents. Our kids were 4 and 6. And so I was like, okay, that I can be okay with it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And then we just stayed in this breed because he got very attached to this breed. But our cat we got from Petco had definitely been abused. His tail was broken. At the very tip, it was a 90-degree angle. Mm-hmm. And someone had cut his eyelid. And the veterinarian I took him to when we were adopting him said, this was not a tear, this was a slice. So it was human inflicted. And that and the broken tail, he was 5 months old. And I just cannot wrap my head around how anybody can do that to an animal. So I am sure in your time at the county animal shelter, you saw abused animals, which is not usually the case in a place where I can afford to bring my animal and let me call my husband and see how long he's been coughing, right?
Yeah, I did. I could share some horror stories, but I talk about the eye-opening part. I saw the inhumanity that I just didn't quite know existed, that people, you may occasionally read about it or hear a story about it on the news, but I was experiencing this, on a weekly basis, on someone throwing a litter of puppies, in a barrel and putting the top on it and then floating them down the river just so they could suffocate, or, target practice for pets, and they come in shot, and I could go on and on, but yeah, there is an ugly side to human behavior that I experienced.
It probably got you prepared in some ways for what you do now. And to know that what you just said, most of the unhoused people's pets are fairly well taken care of and have a lot of attention. Most people walking around town wouldn't think that was true. So, but you had already seen probably the worst of the worst. So anything that was going on would have been something that you would have been prepared for. Mm-hmm. I'm sure every single unhoused person doesn't have a perfect pet, and I don't think that's what you're saying. But if you've come across something, you've probably seen worse at the shelter in the county, which is so horrible. It's so disheartening. I think I just had someone else on this podcast who was talking about an experience with someone who was an alcoholic, and she had never been around anyone who ever really drank. So she couldn't recognize those behaviors. Mm-hmm. She didn't understand what was happening. There was no putting 2 and 2 together for her because she didn't have 2 or 2. She just couldn't. And then when she finally figured out what was going on, it was such like, this happens in the world moment. I would imagine that's what you're talking about. And these animals coming in that you just have no idea. People are like, why are people like that? Why are people without compassion? Why do you see someone who's without a home and and just judge them and say that person's crazy, or that person's lazy, or that person's an addict? It's just not true. Yeah. And maybe for some people it's true, but I don't really think so.
What I've learned is it's not fair for us to write their story. we just don't know, right?
100%.
To make
Yeah.
those assumptions. When people make assumptions about us, and they can be small assumptions, that doesn't feel good,
No.
right? Maybe to assume after a conversation like that guy's stupid. Well, I mean, maybe I wasn't on top of my game, or maybe I was having a bad day, or there's a lot of reasons. But when you put somebody in a box, which we do with the unhoused every day, all the time, and I did it myself before I started doing the work, I would see an able-bodied looking guy on a corner, and he's out panhandling. And what do you think? You think just go get a job, right? We've all said that to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But when I've sat down with that same guy and his dog and talked to him, there is a lifetime of stuff before that may have led to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he's not mentally stable to hold a job.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's suffering from some sort of trauma. Maybe he's trying to get clean. Maybe it's economic, and maybe he just never quite knew how to, I had great parenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with that support, I learned a lot of things. Maybe he never had that,
Mm-hmm.
right? How to hold a job, for example. So again, just to, cast this on somebody, in this way, I wear this shirt, because that is our motto. For anybody that helps me do this work,
Mm-hmm.
that is where we start. There is no judgment in what we do. It's just help.
Right. Right. What do you think in your childhood? What made you want to be a veterinarian?
A movie.
What movie?
I'll see if you can guess it. I'm not going to assume we're close to the same age. I think I'm older, but
I'm 53, so you tell me.
Oh, I guess we're going to be the same age. I'll be 53 in, about a month.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. All right.
1970.
Huh?
1970.
1970.
Right? Best year ever.
That's right. Well, then you've probably seen this movie.
Okay.
I saw this movie when I was 7.
When you were 7.
And
1977.
it was about a beautiful, majestic black horse.
Black Beauty.
No.
No?
There's another.
National Velvet?
No, there's another black.
Oh.
The
Black Stallion?
There you go.
Uh-huh.
That was the movie. And I came out of that movie with my mom, and I was just fixated on, it was something about the relationship between the boy and the horse.
Mm-hmm.
And when the horse was hurt or injured, I just remember thinking, I want to know, I want to grow up and know how to heal an animal.
Oh, did you have pets?
Yeah, we grew up with pets, always had pets. Mom was a big dog lover. Well, she has everything. She has horses and chickens, even today.
That's great.
So yeah, we grew up around pets, and I just, it was kind of then that I knew.
Mm.
And the other time, very, very near that time, I remember seeing this injured golden retriever running through our neighborhood. And it looked like it had been in a fight, because its ear flap was ripped down, and you could kind of see like the shiny, glistening cartilage, like the bloody cartilage. I remember seeing that so distinctly, looking out the window, coming home from school one day. As soon as we got home, I jumped out of the car and I tried to go find that dog. And I chased that dog all around the neighborhood, but it was scared. And I went to bed that night, just laying in my bed, looking at the ceiling, thinking, I want to go find that dog. And the next day I went to look for the dog. And the third day I went to look for that dog. I never found that dog again. Mm. And I remember talking to my mom about it over dinner. Like, I want to find that dog. Is scared. And I don't know, for some reason that stuck with me. And so that all happened when I was 7. I knew at a very early age what I wanted to do.
That's so great. You're really lucky. Not everybody is that lucky.
Yeah, I am lucky. I'm more lucky or fortunate that I was actually able to see it through, because the road to get through
Mm-hmm.
veterinary school, to get into veterinary school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could know what you want to do and believe in it with all your heart and not get accepted to vet school or medical school or law school. But a lot of things fell into place for me.
That's great. Well, you were meant to be here. Destiny again. I do believe in that completely. I wanted to be a vet for about 15 minutes. No, really. For a minute in high school, I really wanted to be a vet because I love animals. My dad's parents had a farm, so we had 250 head of cattle. My grandparents raised goats and chickens and pigs, and I was there a lot. I used to love to go in the pasture and deal with the cows with my grandpa. And the local vet, Dr. Teat was his name, was the happiest person I knew. He was jolly, and he loved his job. And so when you're in high school and you're guidance counselors, what do you want to do what do you want to do for a living? What do you want to do? I thought for a minute, I want to do what he's doing because he's so happy and he's so fulfilled. I'm not a science brain in that way. I never would have been. The care of animals, awesome. But the scientific part, maybe not so much. But I just remember thinking he is so fulfilled in his job and he's so happy all the time. It must be a really good job. Yeah, he loved it. He did it till he was very old and was a great, great guy. I have great fond memories of our local vet.
Well, then why just 15 minutes?
Because I very quickly realized that I would never stay in school for 8 years. I didn't even graduate from college. I get too bored too quickly and I'm, a new shiny object. Oh, a new shiny object. And, that's why that's why I do my podcast. And every week I talk to somebody different about something entirely different. Because I get bored really easily, I think.
Well, it's not too late. I mean,
I think it might be.
Oh, okay.
Late.
Well,
at 53.
Well, I had 40-year-olds.
Yeah.
We had 3 people in my class, 40 plus.
Yeah. Well, he had a job, like a 9-to-5 business job, and was not happy and went, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the 70s, which I think it might have been a little bit more unusual then to pivot your career.
Yeah.
Especially my hometown is 1,600 people. Nobody really, you do what you do.
We're in Georgia?
It's called Bowden.
Okay.
It's like Central Georgia.
West. Okay.
It's tiny.
1,600.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter's middle school was 1,800. And I was sitting in her school one day going, my whole town goes to this school every day.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. People, they got into a career and because you always had bills coming your way, it was too hard just to
pivot.
Yeah.
He pivoted. That was his dream and he was the happiest guy. It was I think it's a great, honorable profession. Our current veterinarian just passed away. I adored him. Dr. Dogra. He constantly told me how India was the first place on the planet that had veterinary medicine.
Yeah.
Their culture has always been very animal focused, positive. So as a vet, I think this way a lot. You're given what you can bear, right, in life. I think you're given jobs like your job at county shelter and because it's what you can bear. It's how you're built. Do you think that's true? Do you find sometimes your job is a lot to bear?
Yeah. I mean, when I was at the shelter, I had moments where it was too much to bear. That's why I considered quitting. I mean, looking back now, I don't know if I would have admitted it at the time, but I was going through some depression probably. Mm-hmm. And
how could you not? If you're killing 50 animals a day, you'd be dead inside.
Yeah. The hardest part was I'm leading a team of people that also have to do this every day. Mm-hmm. And they see cracks in me, then they're more likely to fall apart or quit or leave. But it's almost my job as the general to come in and motivate them, keep morale up, explain to them why we're doing this. And sometimes in some days it's hourly reminders of why we're doing this. And most of my staff know this was like younger girls who were also dreaming of getting into the profession or maybe being vets one day. And so they thought they'd cut their teeth on, and there's 100 things you can do in a shelter, right? From cleaning stalls to walking to feeding to the medical part. So there's just so many jobs and things you can learn. And a lot of them thought, I'll get into this. And then, but yeah, the euthanasia part and the trauma and the abuse cases we saw. And I just, on their faces, I remember so many times thinking, I don't know if I'd be able to handle this at that age.
Right.
Guy or girl, just having this like beautiful, shiny idea of what it's like to care for puppies and animals. And then you walk into this quote unquote nightmare. And then them usually being the ones to have to actually perform the euthanasia.
Right.
To have to stick the needle in the vein.
Forget it.
And then you just watch the light.
Oh, forget it.
And so, yeah, after doing it for so many years, what I would do and probably why it just looking back again, it wasn't the best way to deal with this. We know we have so many more tools at our disposal. We're learning about how to deal with, emotional strife and self-care and all these things. I didn't even know what compassion fatigue was. It was like, well, I'm a guy. I got this. Don't worry. I'm built for this. But to hide it from the staff, I had this thing where occasionally I'd just walk off into the furthest corner of the shelter in an empty cage where I couldn't be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just close the gate and just sit there kind of like I am now and just sometimes cry, sometimes just breathe, shake it off, and then go back in the pit.
Wow.
And start again.
Really a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. I wouldn't, I don't know that I would change anything because it is the reason I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot. I don't know.
Compassion fatigue. I've never heard that term.
Yeah, compassion fatigue. Neither did I back then, but it is exactly as it says. You reach a point where I was becoming desensitized to euthanizing animals, to what I was doing because I was drained. Mm-hmm. And then the sad part is you take that home with you sometimes, and your son is coming up to you wanting daddy's help with homework, or he's trying to explain about his day. Maybe it wasn't the best day. Maybe he was bullied that day. And I just found moments where I was like, you're gonna have to deal with that, or I don't know what to say.
Right.
And you find yourself in that spot and you need to make a change.
Yeah. Yeah. Compassion fatigue. That's intense, because that's the one thing you don't want to lose as a person, right? Is compassion. It's one of the most important feelings or states of being you could be in, is compassion. You just had to do it to survive, right?
Yeah.
I did shut it down.
I had to shut it off. But then I realized when I was doing that, I wasn't doing my job.
Right.
Because these faces, these animals deserve a certain level of care, and it does require some compassion. Mm-hmm. It commands a personal touch, and to be in the moment, and you get outside of that, and it's so easy to say, just euthanize. I can't treat that animal, or
right.
Too far gone, and then you're losing your way.
Right, right. So glad you found your way back. Not that you'd lost your way, but that you found this new path. That's so amazing. So you wrote a book. What's the book about? Is it a memoir? Is it stories? Is it essays? What is it? I didn't know. I found out today. I was like, you wrote a book? I should have read the book
if
first.
I'm writing essays, then we got a problem.
Well, people can have a science and an artistic mind at the same time, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Baking is both science and art.
Sure, yeah. It's a little bit of that. It started out as a little bit of James Herriot. So James Herriot wrote about his adventures as a veterinarian on the countryside in Europe, and I wanted to do the same. I wanted to sort of do an urban version of that. I wanted to take a collection of the best moments I've had out on the streets, mostly in the streets, and just share a piece of that. Mm-hmm. So people can have a glimpse of what I feel, of what I see, and the humanity that is wrapped into the work, and how kindness, just giving little moments of kindness or giving moments of yourself, really keep the world tilted on the right axis. Mm-hmm. Because they do. I wouldn't have said that years ago, but I see it now.
Right.
And it doesn't take a few of us doing extraordinary things. It takes all of us doing little things. Mm-hmm. And if all of us did more of that, we'd be in a much better state.
Yeah.
So yeah, the hardest part writing the book, aside from my dyslexia and learning disability,
welcome. You are welcome here. I have one child, one husband, seriously learning disability and dyslexia.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and overcame it in dealing with it?
Well, Bert's doing okay. I was a senior in high school, so I just from first grade thought if I can just get her out of high school, we'll be good. Same with Bert. Took him 7 years to graduate college.
Really?
Yep.
Because he said he has dyslexia.
Oh yeah, he's dyslexic, and I think he was never diagnosed with dyslexia because he's our age, and that's just they didn't do that. But when Isla got diagnosed, he was like, "Oh, hold on, that's how my brain works. Oh, that's how I process things." And she also has some processing challenges, so she can tell you a story, and then if you ask her to write the story she just told you, it's completely different. her brain processes differently and expresses things very differently. And he's the same way. He'll experience this podcast and we'll have a completely different experience and processing of it than we do. It's what makes him a really great comic and storyteller. And it makes Isla very good at visual art. She's an amazing painter.
Really?
Yep. But ask her to write an essay on the Constitution of the United States. Nope. I mean, she can tell you about it, but if she just tell me and then write what you told me, it's a completely different ballgame. So and Bert wrote a book, and I edited his book as he wrote it because he's dyslexic, and he uses the word that minimum 4 times in each sentence. You know, that guy that does that thing, that vet guy that does that thing at that street over there with that thing. That's how he writes. Doesn't talk like that. But so writing as a dyslexic person is quite challenging.
Yeah. So I sort of have joked that, that was challenging, and I've developed tools over the years to deal with mine. Obviously, at the pace veterinary medicine school comes at you, you have to have it together. I was with some of the brightest minds, I think, in the country. I mean, Colorado State Veterinary School at the time was ranked 2nd in the nation, and the admissions rate was some minuscule percentage. So anyways, I'm competing against very high level genius academic people. But yeah, I've developed things over time. But writing the book, aside, it was the challenging part was like picking my favorite like 10 stories or so, because I have hundreds of them. You know, I've been doing this 12 years, and that was a fun part, is like which 10 stories or so am I going to share?
Well, you got 10 more books, 9 more books, and counting.
Yeah. Well, the hardest part, though, I will tell you, I think internally, the most difficult part was, as I said, initially started out more as storytelling. But when I started working with the editor, she wanted to explore, because I think a lot of people are fascinated with the profession, how, you know, as we sort of delve into some of the emotions of the work I was doing with shelter, how we deal with it. Do we compartmentalize? Do we desensitize? The compassion fatigue? What drives us to do it? What kind of people we are? How are we wired? And so I did go a lot heavier than I ever thought I would into me.
Interesting.
And some of my struggles and little challenges over the years. And it was cathartic. It felt good to do it, but now all my laundry is out there for the world to see, but not in a bad way, because I'll share this part with you, and not that I want this podcast to be a downer, but it's a chance for education.
100%. That's my whole goal.
We as a profession have the highest suicide rates.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I know of any care profession, but we rank almost at the very top of any profession.
Oh my God.
And
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's 3 times the rate of the average person.
What?
3.5 times. Yeah. And, I've often wondered this. I've known this stat's been around for a long time, but it's gotten a lot worse lately. To the point where there's this new program or new organization called NOMV. It's called NOMV, Not One More Vet. And it was established by a veterinarian who lost her close friend who was a veterinarian to suicide. And she just thought, we have to start doing something about this. And it goes back to what I was talking about, sort of the compassion fatigue and dealing with this. And so I explore that in the book, because I wanted to ask myself the question, knowing this is what I do and knowing that I want to keep doing it for as long as I can do, how am I going to stay in the game? And to wrap your head around the depression or the suicide thing, I think people probably need to understand this, and I'll sort of tell it in a very brief story. We go to school because we want to save animals. My story started when I saw the black stallion, and I wanted to treat the horse and save the horse. But then one day, you find yourself in a room with a family euthanizing your first pet. And then you find yourself doing it again and again and again. And then if you find yourself in my situation where you're euthanizing dozens of them, you start to absorb this residue over time. And I'll tell you about my own people for a second. I think as a profession, veterinarians we're just more emotional. I think that's how we're wired. I think we're a little more sensitive. probably why we sort of direct or move into this direction, right? We head here is because we know we have what it takes to care for animals, and it takes a special person to do that day in, day out, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so you take this person who's emotional, a little more sensitive,
Yep.
and you stick them in this profession where they're required in the only profession in the world to put down their patients.
Oh, forget it.
And then you do that over and over and over again. And then you happen to just run into a day like this where you're in room 1 and I am euthanizing the Johnson family pet they've had for 15 years. You just told me you recently lost your Yorkie mix.
Yeah, she was a terrier mix and our cat within like 6 weeks of each other. He was the dog was 17, the cat was 16. And the cat died naturally, but the dog we had to. I mean, I was so grateful we had the means to put her down that day because she turned a quick corner and like declined in like a 5-day period. I mean, she was old, so she had issues, but not anything that would make you think we were there. And it happened so quickly that and she was in such bad shape that we were like, yes, this is time for her to go.
Would you mind describing the moment to me?
The moment that we put her down or that we realized?
The moment that you're actually going through the euthanasia process.
Oh, we were devastated. We were sobbing. Bert and Isla and I were on the couch. She was in my lap. Mona was in my lap. And we just sobbed and said, thank you. She was such a great pet. She was, oh, I'm going to cry. She was always happy. She was never unhappy. She was the sweetest soul. And she fostered all these other big dogs in our house and out. Priscilla, our bull mastiff, our first one, lived to be 9. Mona was there before and after. Mona fostered these 2 ninnies downstairs in. And Mac fell in love with her. You know, she was our kid's first dog. The cat was our kid's first pet. But Mona was the kid's first dog. And Mona was a rescue. And Mona chose us. Absolutely. Isla was 2 or 3 and 2.5. And for Christmas, she wrote her Christmas list. And she said, "Dear Santa, bring dog." That was it. And so Bert and I started looking in shelters for a dog. We wanted a little dog and couldn't find one that had the temperament, the size, just couldn't find it. And we were walking Isla to dance class just a block and a half away. We come out of our apartment and Mona, this little bitty terrier, walked up to her and put her front paws on Isla's tummy, wagging her tail. And we're like, oh, that's a cute dog. And the lady said, I'm fostering her. She had clearly been through something. She was underweight. And she looked really, really scraggly. She looked scrappy and scraggly. And we found out her story later, which was horrible. But the next day we left and ran into the dog again. The next day we left our apartment, ran into a dog. 3 days in a row, we ran into the same dog. And the lady said, I was like, we've been looking to adopt a dog, but my husband wants something a little bigger than this. Not a big dog, but something medium, like 45 pounds or something. Mona was about 12 pounds. And she said, well, I have to go out of town. So why don't you keep her while I'm out of town for a long weekend? And then, I'll take her back when I'm back. Well, she's a smart lady because, of course, she knew once that dog came in my house, she was not leaving. So Mona came over. My kids loved her. Bert came in. Oh, we don't want that crap dog. I don't want that crappy dog. That's a shit dog. No. Monday, the dog goes back. And of course, that night, the dog was sleeping with Bert. So Bert has Topps made a baseball card. They started making comedian baseball cards. There's a Topps baseball card of Bert holding Mona. So,
really?
Yep.
Oh, he came around.
Oh, Mona was his dog. He always tells people Priscilla was his dog, but Priscilla was my dog. Mona was Bert's dog. Mona slept with Bert. Mona sat in the recliner with Bert. If she were young enough, she would have started going on the road with him. But she was amazing. So, yeah, when we put her down, it was just it was a really mixed moment. She had gone deaf. And that caused her a lot of anxiety. And even though she was on anxiety medication, she barked a lot. And I mean like a lot. So for the people that lived in the house with her, it was a lot. not only was it a lot to just hear barking all the time, but I felt terrible that I couldn't help her feel better, to calm down and to not be so scared. She was blind in one eye, and I think she was not seeing well in the other eye. She was 17, she was an old lady. We called her old lady forever. But I kept watching her, and I would go, well, she still goes in the yard. She still patrols the perimeter of the whole yard. She's eating great. She's sleeping great. She's still wagging her tail. She still wants to be wherever we are. So I think she's okay. She's just an old lady.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 5 days before we put her down, she got this horrible breath. I mean, like bad breath. Like I was like, she's got like a rotten tooth or something is going on. And she just seemed to not feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took her to the vet. The vet did blood work. This was a Friday. He said, blood work will be back Monday. I think she has a lot of things going on here. So I don't want to say anything until I see everything. I think he did x-rays and he just did a bunch of stuff. Got back and he goes, I think she's, what did he say? Like liver failure?
I was about to say, I almost beat you to it. When they have that smell, a lot of people don't catch this, but it's almost like a rotting smell. And it's their organs, a lot of times their liver starting to deteriorate.
That's what he said. And so I said, what do we do? And he goes, well, here's this treatment plan. And I always did this with Dr. Dogra. What would you do? He said, I'd let her go.
That's a hard question for vets, by the way.
I bet.
Yeah.
But, I always said to him, I want to know. I don't want you to feel responsible. I want you to talk to me like this was your pet.
Yeah.
Because I don't pay you to give me some load of crap.
Mm-hmm.
I pay you to tell me what I should do, to be the most humane to this little critter who has meant so much to our whole family. I would never want her to suffer.
Yeah.
And she was suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, when we finally got the euthanasia person to come over, I sat her in the grass to go to the bathroom because she wasn't walking well, and she just fell over. And I went, oh, girlfriend, can you get here an hour earlier? Like this needs to be over for her. She needs to be done. She's given us enough and she needs to go. And so we just sat with her and talked to her and thanked her so much. Just said, thank you so much. Christine down in the office, who I think was talking to Ian about getting you here, is probably crying because Christine was the person that took Mona if we ever went out of town. It was a really hard goodbye. It was really hard. And then our cat Gus died while we were on the road with Bert. And that was even worse because our dog and cat sitter took him to the vet. And the vet was like, oh, he's not doing great, but I think he's going to be okay till you get home. And he died that night. And I feel, I feel so much guilt for that animal dying at the vet because he hated the vet. He hated it. So I don't have guilt for Mona. I don't feel bad about Mona. I think we did everything exactly as it was supposed to be. If Dr. Dogra had told me when we took her in on that Friday, let's put her down today, we would have done it that day. But I didn't have that opportunity to do it for Gus. And I wasn't here to see his behavior and if he was really deteriorating. It was just my dog cat sitter who knows him, but not like I do. And that cat slept with me every night for 16 years.
Gosh.
He was my roommate, my best friend. He was my baby boy. Until Mac showed up, he was the only boy in the house besides Bert. That one got me. I'm still having a really hard time with Gus. I think I see him in the house all the time. I just catch him.
Oh.
And he loved the dogs. He would sleep with the dogs. The dogs loved him. He was just the coolest. He was the one that had the cut eye and the broken tail.
I'm sorry.
Good old yellow cat. Those yellow cats are the best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. I'm sorry because what I was going to say is I've been with families just like yours in moments just like that. And the example I was going to give, because it happened to me one day, was I'd be in room 1 in a very similar situation, having to euthanize a family pet, but a pet that also feels like it's mine too, because I've been a vet now for 25 years. So in some cases, I've been with this puppy or this kitten since it was born with this family. And then here it is, 14, 15. And together we're doing a humane euthanasia. And, to your point in your story, there is something very peaceful and in some ways beautiful about humanely euthanizing somebody, an animal that's suffering, to remove it from a state of suffering.
Yes.
That is part of our veterinary oath, in fact, is to alleviate pain and suffering. And to be given that in my profession is a gift in some ways. The human profession can't do that. Not really. It's not prevalent yet. So I appreciate that part of it, but I would be in a room 1 with a family like yours. I'd step into room 2 20 minutes later, and it would be a new couple, young married couple with a puppy, and they're excited, and I have to change this face when inside moments ago I was crying with the family too, because again, it almost feels like my own pet. And let that go for a second and show the excitement with them, and give them all the little educational pieces in the training. And then 20, 30 minutes after that, step into room 3 and do exactly what I did in room 1.
Do you go to therapy?
I didn't until much later in my
Everybody
career.
should.
I know. And you do that over and over, year after year. You get this sort of emotional, empathetic person to begin with. And again, I sort of go into a longer explanation. It really is not a wonder why a lot of us in some moments just take our lives. And we have a hard time saying no. We want to be there to help. When someone says, hey, look, I'm calling in sick. Can you come in and work your 7th shift of the week? And you do. Or the boss says, I need you here. Can you work a 14-hour shift? Or, a family comes in sobbing, saying they don't have the money for triage. And I've gone into my own pocket when I had student loans and bills myself and said, I'll cover the cost because I didn't own the practice, but I'll take care of it for you. And you keep giving yourself until you find yourself in your own hole. And I had thoughts during a time in my life of suicide. And so, yeah, I do. I go into that piece of it, and it can be a tough profession. Again, it's a very rewarding, beautiful profession. We have this education to do what nobody else in the world can do. And it's a very respected profession.
Yes.
And I wouldn't change it for anything, but if you don't manage yourself, it does take its toll.
You'd have to. I mean, it's obvious that you work out. You mentioned that also before, but that self-care, not to be so buzzwordy, but for someone like what you just described, if you're in that every day, it's almost like, I don't know how it couldn't cause you to have PTSD. You'd have to have some kind of
trauma.
It's traumatic. Death is traumatic, even with Mona under the best circumstances. Yeah. We're still traumatized by losing this member of our family. I can't imagine doing that over and over, day after day. You'd have to be made of a certain metal, or have a lot of help,
or give in and not see your next day.
Well, I don't like that answer.
I know. Well, I mean, sadly for some of my colleagues and even people I've known, that was the case.
Yeah, that's so sad. That's so sad, because it is such a give. You know what really stinks is so many people are like, oh, I guess my vet needed a new deck on their house, so I'm having surgery for my dog. I don't really believe that's the way vets work, but I think a lot of people do think that they're like, yeah, sort of need stuff. I mean, if it's obvious, if there's a gaping hole in the side of your dog, but there's some simple things like you're talking about this gentleman outside the 7-Eleven who just needed a simple flea treatment, and people who won't take their animals because they think the vet is trying to get money out of them.
Trying to gouge them.
I hate that. I hate that. And why is it so expensive? I would imagine your insurance alone is ridiculous. So just to put that on top of whatever the schooling you had, the staff you have to keep, the rent you have to pay, the insurance you, I'm sure, have to pay. Come on, it's an expensive model for a business. It's not like, it's very complicated. I would hate to be a veterinarian. I'm so glad that I was only wanted to be one for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
This is a lot easier.
You just ran down the list of, you're right. And it is frustrating when you hear a client or you hear it sort of rumored or talked about that we're about the money and we're gouging people. We're a business, and really to keep the doors open so we can keep serving animals, we have to charge a rate that pays for all the things you just mentioned.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that you can work out regularly, maintain some kind of self-care. Hey, therapy is not cheap. And if you're someone like a veterinarian, I guarantee you're not getting the sliding scale of payment from your therapist. You're paying $250 an hour or whatever it is. And it's very expensive to be that person. You deserve it. I can't imagine. The one thing that amazes me about vets is you're treating a dog in this room, a cat in this room, a snake in this room, a chicken in this room. Maybe not every vet's like that, but my local vet had to treat everything: large animal, small animal, exotic animal, because there was no other vet. And the brain that I don't even know how you learn all that stuff in 8 years or however long it takes you to get out of vet school, because there's so many different types, species, genus of animal that comes in your door that you have to have all this knowledge. It's a wonder you don't charge twice what you charge, you know?
Yeah. So here's a little fact, personal fact. And I've had a great life, so it's in no way a complaint. To me, I just saw it as an investment. But I just paid off my student loans after 23 years. So just about a year and a half ago.
Wow. Congratulations.
I finally paid off my student loans. So we're just under this mountain of debt. And a lot of people do think, they think we're just like, we're paying for our beach house and it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we struggle to pay our staff a fair wage. I mean, a lot of technicians, veterinary nurses who have the same technical skills of an RN are making minimum wage.
That's insanity.
Are making minimum wage. They can't, they have to like live with 3 roommates and they're driving some old beater because they don't get paid a fair wage. And people complain about the cost. I get it, because there's largely no insurance and it's out of pocket. So to them, it feels like a hit. Right. And a lot of Americans are struggling economically. So it's like, when I quote them $1,500 for a treatment or a service, it's like, oh, so we get that a lot. I'm at peace with that. You'd have to be. You just have to you're at peace with, you're going to get complaints every once in a while and they're going to blame us and it's our fault. And why would you let my pet die? And can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And you just move on and keep doing what you're doing.
How would you let my pet die? People really say that to you. Do they think you're God? I mean, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to money and I say,
I see,
it's going to be this much to do this treatment or this surgery.
Right.
I need, your dog has a splenic tumor. I need to go in and remove the spleen. It's going to be X amount of dollars. And I can't do that. I can't afford that.
No.
And I can't get that money. And you're going to let my dog die. You're not going to do the surgery. And you're just,
I wonder what the profit margin is for veterinary clinics in general.
What kind of money are they clearing?
Like, what's the margin? Like, a successful business has like a 20% profit margin.
Yeah, good question. It's around 18%.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're almost there. You're there, but you're almost like, if 20% is the mark, then if people can hear that and know that you're paying $1,500 to have a dog's spleen removed, that's legit.
Yeah, we're not keeping 1,000 of that in our pocket.
Exactly. That you have to meet that profit margin to make sense to continue. To
keep the business open.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And right now we have fewer vets. We have fewer services available to pets than we've ever had because we saw such a huge spike during COVID. So we have more pets in this country than we've ever had. Nearing like 70 million dogs, I think.
Jeez.
70% of US households have a dog. So it's numbering in the tens of millions. And there are fewer veterinarians for a lot of the reasons I just mentioned. And it sometimes takes 2 to 3 to 4 weeks to get in to see your vet for a simple ear infection. So now you have people complaining about, I can't even get in to see my vet.
Right.
And a lot of vets are just either, look, I'm too busy, or they're closing their doors, or they're being bought out by corporate America. And so now there are just fewer services. And, and still we're just making those margins to keep the doors open. So you can imagine if we just gave in to, you got to slash your prices in half, then you wouldn't see veterinarians.
They'd be gone. Yeah.
They would be gone.
They'd be gone.
Yeah.
So how do you conduct your unhoused veterinary services? This is going to sound stupid, and I know the answer to some of these questions, but I want to hear it again anyway. Like, do you have a van that you drive around?
I have an SUV. It's parked out right now outside, and I just load it up with supplies. And depending on what kind of day I think I'll have, I may have like collars and leashes and harnesses and things that, just sort of side products, or food. and certainly all my medical supplies. But most of my medical supplies, I pack into a backpack that I can, because I do a lot of walking. The street vet, I'm known as the street vet. I got the moniker because I just walk.
Right.
I just.
Are you by yourself? Do you have a technician?
A lot of times I'm by myself. I do have a technician sometimes, Genesis. She lives here in LA. She's sort of my right hand, and she'll join me. And it's always better when I have help. Otherwise, I'm holding, I'm vaccinating, I'm examining, I'm taking notes, I'm doing it all myself. But yeah, I packed this backpack of which I can probably treat about 80%. I use that round figure, 80% of the cases I see.
Wow.
Right there out of that bag in an alleyway, because I'm packing for the most common things I see.
Which is what?
I see a lot of allergies in Southern California.
Oh, really?
So ear infections, allergies, skin issues. Just think dermatology.
Yep.
It's a lot of that in Southern California. And so I have a kit to treat most allergies. I have antibiotics for skin infections, ear wash, and antibiotics for the ears. And that encapsulates, like, derm cases account for maybe 50% of what I see.
Really?
Yeah, I just see so much derm.
Why? What are they allergic to?
It's stuff in the air. It's environmental. So it's something called atopy, which is inhalant allergies, very prevalent here in California, in certain parts of the country. But you and I would call it hay fever.
Okay.
So they're breathing something in, and in a dog, it stimulates their skin. So for us, we get the runny eyes and runny nose. For dogs, they get itchy skin.
Interesting.
And itchy ears and secondary ear infections. So you smell that, you have that odor coming from the ears. That's usually secondary to a skin allergy somewhere that hasn't been addressed.
Interesting. And what does that skin allergy look like?
It looks like various forms, but when a dog is itchy, they start tearing up the skin, and so you'll just see hot spots, patches of hair missing. We've all seen that in our dog before. And there's pretty effective medications. They're not cheap. I mean, in clinic, it's called a Cytopoint injection. It's just a 1 cc injection of a clear liquid under the skin. But in clinic for a dog, what are your dog's names again?
Izzy and Mac.
So for Izzy and Mac. So Mac is what, 150 pounds?
150 pounds.
For Mac, the Cytopoint injection would run close to $200.
Wow.
The medication isn't cheap itself, but then you're in clinic, the exam and all that. So there's no way a lot of these folks can afford that. No. But it's all covered, through donations. Everything I do is free to them. And I'm able to give them, 5-star in-clinic veterinary care that you would get, and their dog is healed. Do
you have other vets that work with you in your organization?
I do. So for 6 years, it was just me. From, I think, the 7-Eleven story that occurred around 2011, 2012, I'd have to go back and really think about it, but it was right in there. And for 6 years, I did the work quietly, never told anybody. My only sibling, my brother who you met, I never told him.
No?
No. Didn't tell my family, my kids, my friends. I didn't.
It was just something you did for you.
It was something for me.
That's amazing. That's very telling. I think that was a healing process.
It was.
You think so? Yeah, that's amazing. That's very powerful. Not that you need to tell everybody what you're doing, but the fact that you chose to just keep it to yourself for 6 years. That's like when Forrest Gump ran across America back and forth and Jenny dumped him, right?
Yeah, but the world knew, I think, at some point, right?
Yes, they did. But his internal process.
It was just for him.
Is to get his head straight and his soul straight.
You're right. That's a good way to say it. It was probably to get my soul straight. I said, I felt like I was dealing with a lot of guilt from the shelter, and I felt in some ways like God was keeping score and I was losing.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
I had to make it right.
That's heavy.
Yeah. After, there were just too many healthy pets that if would have had more time, we would have had a different system that would have found homes. But in those circumstances, they didn't.
But they weren't circumstances you created.
They weren't.
You just were hired to uphold them. And look at all the positive you did while you were there. You built a whole new shelter.
Yeah.
You cut euthanasia in half.
But still, I carried the memories of a lot of those faces of those healthy dogs I had to put down. And I just started, after that 7-Eleven experience, I just started walking the streets looking for more people like him. and I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to get judged myself. I think.
What would someone judge you for?
Well, I didn't want to be at a gathering or say like a dinner party and just sort of share like, so what are you doing in your free time, Kwan? Well, I don't know. Like after work, some days I'll go out and I find homeless folks with pets, and they don't deserve to have pets.
Oh,
They don't. Why are you helping them?
Well,
like
then
what?
those
They can't
people
take
are-
care of themselves, or consider this, which actually just hit me probably 6 months ago when I was talking to my mother. What if before ever doing that first walk, right after 7-Eleven, I decided, you know what? I think I'm going to pack up like a bunch of drugs and put them in a backpack, and I'm going to walk the most dangerous parts of town with drugs on my back, just aimlessly looking for pets in Skid Row and Compton, or just, name these areas. And how about I run that idea by my mom before I do it?
well, I wouldn't tell your mom.
Right.
That's not the right person.
No.
But maybe for safety, you could have said, hey, just so you know, I'm over here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could have.
As a mom.
Right. Mom, dad, friends, they would have probably discouraged me.
Of course they would have.
The safety issue. And you
Yes.
know what? I didn't tell anybody, I just went and did it.
Yeah.
I did it, and I'm fortunate that it worked out. And
You proved the concept before you put it out there.
Yeah, before I put it out there.
Yeah, you proved it.
Before I had someone come and tell me not to do it for a number of reasons, I just did it. And so yeah, 6 years later, I was having a conversation with a producer on a film set, because for a period there, I was in Hollywood protecting animals on film sets. That was after the shelter. And he's like, that's cool, man. Like that's a reality show. That's a docuseries. So it was made into a show. It's called The Street Vet. It's airing in a bunch of places around the world. And that's really when it sort of, the word started getting out. And then my brother established, he handles all that, because I can't stand social media. He established my Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And actually which I have to tell you, LeeAnn, is not, it should be a good feeling. It's not a good feeling when like a 22-year-old comes up to you and says, you're the TikTok vet. I don't know that I like that, but the word got out, and I think largely through social media, I had other veterinarians reach out saying, I want to do what you do.
Oh, that's great.
Where I live. And that's where it's at today.
That's amazing. That was my question when I saw you on Spectrum One. I was like, where else is doing this because of you? Because I guarantee you, I can't imagine you're the only person who came up with this concept, but you are the only person I've seen or heard of that's done this before. And there's so many other urban areas in the United States that have a lot of unhoused, that have a lot of pets. And I wanted to know where else this is happening, and if that came from you and how you did that. And you just answered it. They reached out to you.
They reached out to me
through social media, which social media gets such a bad rap. It is a two-side of a coin.
Yeah.
Item. There is
is
so many positive things that comes out of social media. So many positive things.
Yeah.
And that's clearly one of them. That's amazing.
Yeah. We have a large presence in Georgia, in Atlanta.
Of course you do, because everybody loves their animals in Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean,
Dr. Kristen Schmidt, and she's a superstar. She's recently out of school, and she's a go-getter. So yeah, I have veterinarians springing up across the country who we call street vet teams are popping up.
that's amazing. Are you so proud?
Yeah. I mean, I guess when I tell my mom, she's like, you should be so proud. I'm like, I guess I am, Mom. Yeah, I guess I don't know that I fully reflected on it yet, or I don't know. I'm a worker bee, and when I was doing the work by myself, I just did the work. I wasn't trying to talk about it, promote it. And even though I'm here with you today, there's a part of me that I just want to do the work. I'm not.
Yeah.
It's my brother who's like, when you go down and ask him now, like, Kwan won't take pictures of himself. He won't, he needs the stories to share what I'm doing, which is, bringing others on board.
Well, bringing others on board and bringing you some funding.
Right.
Right? Because this is something that should be funded. There are lots of opportunities to give in the world of your volunteer time, of your expertise, of your money. And even people who don't make a lot of money, my whole life, even when I was broke like that, I always gave to the ASPCA. I gave like $20 a year because then at least I felt like I was contributing. And I've talked about this a lot on my podcast. I believe in service. I believe that everyone should be of service.
Yeah.
And service looks different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Service can be writing a check. That seems shallow to some people. But if that check allows someone else to do better service, then you are also of service, right?
Right.
I am in service. I've been a Girl Scout troop leader for 13 years. That's service.
Yeah.
That's some serious service. In their teenage years, it might be harder than the county shelter. I'm just saying. Sometimes it's a bit dicey, but I do that because I believe that's what you should do. What you should do is be of service.
Yeah.
So by not talking about it, you're possibly denying other people an opportunity to be of service.
Yeah.
Even if it's by spreading the word, by getting other vets to come on board, by getting money. It's not shallow to ask for money or gross or whatever. One could say, well, he's a vet, he could afford to fund it himself. No, you should not. It's larger than that.
Well, I did for 6 years until I couldn't.
I know that because no one knew about it.
Yeah, it was all out of pocket, and
and you shouldn't be that. If you're willing to give your expertise and your time, then the community around you should be willing to help you carry that load. The thing about you, I have a feeling, is that you're someone who carries a lot of the load by yourself, not realizing there are people standing around going, hey, I can take a bag. I'll take a bag. You don't have to carry all 8 bags. I'll carry a bag. He carries a bag. Now you're carrying 4 bags,
Yeah.
I can relate. I am very similar.
Are you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll pick up all 13 Girl Scouts and carry them all by myself because I'm a worker bee also. And a lot of times I just get it done and then I'm exhausted and realize that maybe I could have given somebody a couple bags and not be quite so exhausted. But I love the work. I love whatever the work is. I love it. I love being alive and being present for other people. And that service piece, I think, is really missing today. I don't know why. I don't know if fewer people are going to church, and I'm not even a church-going person, but church is about service. I don't know if it's just not required in schools. And we always had fundraisers and bake sales, and you had to work them, and that's sort of service where you could get funding for your cheerleading squad or whatever it is. And parents just pay for a lot these days. Not all parents, not everyone's privileged like that, but I don't know. I just find that service is missing. And what an amazing service you're doing for a population of people who really need it. I have an uncle that was unhoused for a while when I was a kid.
Really?
Yes. I remember my parents were divorced. My dad's actually downstairs. I remember driving through Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta with my mom, and we saw her brother under an overpass asleep. And we woke him up. He was an alcoholic and did some drugs and brought him home. And he lived with us for a little bit. But he couldn't really get it together. He never really got it together. And would sometimes have a house and would sometimes be living on somebody's couch and would sometimes just be missing in action. Turned out he was diagnosed late in life as schizophrenic. He drank to manage his mental health. And he babbled like you see people on the street babbling. He would talk to me for 20 minutes about the Mayan calendar, and I would go, yeah, don't follow, don't know. I know what you're talking about, but he was always off in some other place, and I always felt he was just too kind for this world. He was a kind person that just had this disability, really is a disability. And he loved cats. He always loved cats. He was a big cat fan. So I would imagine if he had been in the position that a lot of people you help, he was never truly unhoused all the time. He would probably have a cat out with him.
I do meet my fair share of the homeless that have cats, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cats are like dogs, and they stay close to their home area, their tent, or whatever it may be. And yeah, they're they're very loyal. Surprisingly, yeah, they don't. You think of a cat like roaming, and but no, a lot of these cats are. It's pretty remarkable.
Cats pick a person.
Yeah,
and they stick with that person.
yeah.
That's their person.
Mm-hmm.
So if a homeless person has a cat, I'm not surprised at that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Cats are very like, that's my person.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to me about all this. Can you please if it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to, but I'm going to tell everybody where they can go to donate. Or you can tell them.
Yeah, we have a website. It's projectstreetvet.org. And there's a way to donate there. You can go to the Instagram handle. It's the Street Vet. And there's a link that can direct you. And I think the cool part about the website is you'll find other information about the number of pets we've helped, how we're growing. We're almost doubling our service every year, and some of the cases and some of the teams popping up, all things that I am very proud of. And I mean, how I do hope at this point, which is funny because I was just a one-man band for so long, that if I can have a service like this available in every major city in the country, then I've hit the peak.
Yeah,
And we're working towards that. And I have to thank so many of the people who have the donations. Very generous people donate and keep this thing afloat. But it also doesn't happen without the volunteers and the veterinarians, because 99% of the man hours committed to this mission are by volunteer veterinarians, volunteer technicians, volunteer assistants. People just want to come out, hold, deliver the dog food, break up or set up and break down the tables and the vaccines. And it's by people that care, like you said, service, that want to help. And so I want to make sure they get their due thanks, because it also doesn't exist without them. But it takes a village, and the village is growing. So if people want to donate, that would be the place to do it. And messages of support, we love those too. I still get, you're going to laugh at this, but this is an old school thing. I get letters
you do,
like handwritten letters, usually from our generation or older, right?
Yeah.
That don't want to email, but there's an appreciation I have for like a handwritten note, like someone who's took the time to sit down and write a 2-page letter, like 1970, and then put it in the mail and send it to me. And I get a lot of those. And
what are they saying?
They're just saying they're thankful, and I found my place on this planet, and I'm using my skills for the good of humanity and pets, and just very warm, special things.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. You have kids?
I do.
What do they think about this?
They, well, some of them on the younger side, 8 and 4, probably don't quite get it, but no. I have a 22-year-old who's in college.
What?
Who was my very first assistant at my very first clinic back in 2012. So I started walking the streets, but simultaneously I started popping up like little clinics right near homeless food banks. And he was 11 at the time, and he had big rubber gloves on that didn't fit his hands, and he was out there
amazing
helping dad. And yeah, so he gets it. And I think what I do love about it now that I look back is there's a very strong message or lesson that I'm also sending my kids.
Oh yeah. That,
to your point about service, kindness, helping others, and we have to share these things beyond. And my parents taught me this as well, beyond our obligations of career and work for income to support the family. There should always be a human element that gives back outside of that realm of, quid pro quo, do something, receive something. Mm-hmm. You have to find other things in this world where you give without agenda, and that is it. You leave it alone.
Yep.
And I feel like as a person, as a human, if you don't do that, you're not ever going to be completely fulfilled.
I totally agree with you. A give is a give. A give doesn't expect anything in return. It is exactly that. It is a pure give. And if you can't teach that to your kids are going to have a really hard time. as they grow up. I think that you know, something that was always really important to me when raising my kids when they were younger is that they treated every person they saw with respect. And that sounds obvious, but that's not actually what I mean. You know, when you check out at Target, I make my kids look at the cashier in the face and say, "How are you doing today?" And really mean the ask, not to be flippant, and listen to the answer and respond to that answer. And you have no idea what the simple, "How are you doing today?" in a plugged in way can affect the other person. That person may have just gotten completely bawled out by their boss. That person may have been so late for work because they got in a car accident. And the simple, everyday act of service that is seeing another human being and letting them feel that you see them is so powerful. And that community that you walk into and really see does not ever really get to feel that.
I love that. That sounds like old school Southern values to me, because we don't see a lot of that today.
No, it is. That's how I was raised, for sure. That came 100% from my dad and his entire family, his parents, because you put your britches on just like I do.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, you know, you have a heart attack, I have a heart attack, we both having a heart attack. We're exactly the same. That lesson you're giving your kids, and probably some volunteers that are working with you already feel that way or have that, but I bet that you exhibit it in a very different way. That exhibition of that seeing of another person is really powerful.
There's something very striking that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll leave you with this last little fun medical tidbit about the power of pets. And you'll appreciate this because you're a huge pet lover.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think that people fully realize, because it's probably just subconscious, that I just love being around my pet, but the chemical release, almost like extreme sports or gambling or some of the other highs that people get, it happens with your pet because there are 3 chemical reactions happening in your body when you do something as simple as hug Mac.
Mm-hmm.
So you're having a bad day, and talking about some of the ways that I healed back in the day, the shelter days, it was something as simple as hugging my dog or petting my dog, because in that moment, and I call it the biological spa treatment, because inside your body, you are releasing oxytocin, which is a hugging hormone, mood enhancer. You're releasing prolactin, believe it or not, men too. It's not just for lactating mothers, but you release prolactin, which also increases feelings of contentment and happiness. And the last compound that you're releasing is phenylethylamine. And that compound actually has been shown to treat ADHD and PTSD.
No way.
So hugging, the simple act of hugging your pet. And so when you're sleeping with your dog every day, and so you wonder why you feel this loss when they're gone,
Uh-huh.
it's because all those years you were getting this affirmation, this dopamine, serotonin release, these feelings inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I end on that note because pets do play such an integral role in our lives for so many people, none more so than the folks on the streets. Because if anybody could use what I just described,
right,
it is somebody who is suffering, who feels alone, and needs that kind of support. And that is the whole foundation of the mission.
Well, that's a great foundation to build a house on. I hope that you get responses, not just from this, my little bitty podcast, but from every step you take forward from every major metropolitan city in this country, and that your dream comes true, because you deserve it. And so do the people who will receive the services.
Thank you.
They all deserve it. Best of luck.
Thank you.
And I can't thank you enough for talking to me. I've been so excited about having you on since I saw you and I reached out to Christine. I was like, I hope he comes, because I'm just dying to talk to you about. I was so inspired by what you do. It's amazing.
I loved it. It just came from Skid Row, and it was just
to my pink flowery room.
It was a skip, hop, and a jump right here, so it was easy. I live in San Diego. I'll head back home, but it was a true pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Best of luck.
Thank you.